Okay, let's just dive right in. There's this paradox, right? Something really common. But when you stop and think about it, it's actually quite profound. You, the listener, you make a choice. You sit down, maybe it's in front of the TV, you open a book, you put on your headphones, and you deliberately choose to experience, well, emotional pain, fictional suffering.
You pick the movie you know is going to wreck you,
Huh?
or that album about heartbreak, or a novel about some truly awful historical period. Why do we actually pay money, spend our time seeking out things that are designed to, dismantle us emotionally?
Yeah. We build up these artists, don't we? The ones who seem to live on the edge, Dostoevsky, Plath, maybe Van Gogh. We're drawn to art that feels like someone's breakdown made beautiful or something.
It is something like that. And think about that feeling when the movie ends or the song finishes, that sigh of relief.
Right. Not just, oh, the scary part is over.
Yeah.
It feels cleansing almost.
Exactly. It's a specific kind of release. And that suggests it's not random. It's not just a taste for misery.
Or simple masochism.
No, it's deeper. It points to a mechanism, something structural about how we operate, especially in modern civilized life.
Okay, so that's what we're getting into today. Why this craving? Why this emotional roller coaster ride that we choose?
To really get it, we have to start right at the foundations, the deep psychological view of human nature. And it requires accepting a premise that's maybe uncomfortable.
Which is
that you aren't born this rational, polite, being ready for, spreadsheets and small talk. You're born as pure drive, chaotic, insatiable.
like Freud's id.
Precisely the id. Sexual drives, aggressive drives, destructive urges. It doesn't care about social niceties. It wants, it demands, it rages. It has no concept of later or no.
And civilization then? Our laws, our etiquette, our workplace rules.
Yeah.
That's all just management.
It's more than management. It's the structure built specifically to contain and crucially bury that raw nature.
Right, not shape it.
Bury it alive. We aren't civilized because we somehow evolved beyond instinct. We're civilized because we were forced, systemically, generation after generation, to push those instincts down, out of sight.
So every time you bite your tongue, or smile when you're furious.
That's the architecture at work. Don't do that. Every demand for emotional control, every expectation to perform politeness, these are the bricks in the wall.
Yeah.
The wall keeping the eye buried.
Okay, so our mission then, for you listening, is to unpack this whole relationship, this tension between our inner chaos and the civilized world we live in.
And specifically, what happens when that buried stuff finds a loophole, a way out, even for a moment?
Through art, through stories, through music. Is that release real freedom? Or is it just another part of the system, a kind of decorated cage?
That's the core question we need to explore. So the key mechanism here, the engine driving all this, is repression. We need to be really clear, though, repression isn't the same as suppression.
Okay, what's the difference? Suppression is like consciously holding back.
Exactly. Suppression is, I am incredibly angry right now, and I want to yell at my boss, but I'm choosing not to because I need this job. You're aware of the impulse, and you actively control it.
Right, makes sense.
Repression is different. It's unconscious, the forbidden urge. Maybe it's a destructive fantasy, a sexual desire that society condemns, maybe intense envy. It's not just denied expression, it's pushed out of your conscious awareness altogether.
So you don't even know you feel it.
You don't know. The urge is still there, exerting pressure, but it's buried, banished.
Okay, and that's the connection to modern life you were talking about. The more successful or put together we seem on the outside.
The more pressure builds up inside, it's an inverse relationship. The more you conform to the external demands, politeness, efficiency, emotional regulation, that whole wellness performance, the more your inner world can become this pressure cooker full of stifled desires, silent rages, things you wouldn't dare admit even to yourself.
We perform functionality all day.
Because civilization demands function. It doesn't actually care if you're genuinely happy or honest deep down. It needs you to show up, do the work, follow the rules, maintain the structure.
And this forces a split inside us.
A fundamental splitting. This is where those classic Freudian concepts come in. You've got the id, the buried chaos, the raw drive.
Right.
Then you have the ego, the conscious self, the negotiator, the part of you trying to navigate the real world, manage the demands of the id and the constraints of society.
Okay, the ego is trying to keep things running smoothly. But what enforces the rules? What keeps the ego in line?
That's the superego. Think of it as the internalized authority. It's not just your parents' voices anymore. It's the sum total of all the shoulds and shouldn'ts you've absorbed from culture, school, religion, media, even HR policies.
Like an internal policeman.
A merciless one. It's constantly monitoring your thoughts, your feelings, your impulses, and it judges relentlessly. That's selfish. That's lazy. That's inappropriate. You're not good enough.
And the ego is afraid of that judgment.
Terrified. So the ego works overtime to keep the id's forbidden impulses hidden, buried, repressed, precisely to avoid the superego's condemnation and maintain social functioning.
But hold on, if these drives, these id impulses, are potentially dangerous or disruptive, isn't repression actually necessary?
Yeah.
Isn't it just self-control, maturity? Why frame it so negatively, like it's poison?
Because it is different from healthy self-control, which is more like conscious suppression. Repression isn't neutralization. The energy of the drive doesn't vanish.
Where does it go?
It gets twisted. It turns inward, becomes weaponized against the self. It fuels anxiety, neurosis, inexplicable sadness, depression, compulsive behaviors, maybe even physical symptoms. It festers. The aim of the civilizing process from this perspective isn't really to integrate these wild energies healthily. It's often more about paralyzing them. And a paralyzed drive eventually finds an outlet somewhere. Often that outlet is pathology.
Or art.
Or art. Hashtag 1.2 art as the legal loophole. Exactly.
This is where art comes in as this crucial, almost legal loophole. If the id, the buried chaos, can't get out directly into your life,
it finds a side door.
A sanctioned side door. A fantasy space. So art, in this view, isn't just decoration or entertainment, it's the sanctioned hallucination. It's socially proved temporary psychosis.
Wow, okay. That's a strong claim, a sanctioned hallucination.
It's the one place where the forbidden thoughts and feelings are allowed expression, as long as they stay within the frame or the song or the pages of the book.
So when I watch something like, I don't know, Requiem for a Dream, that movie is just devastating. Total self-destruction.
Right, and by watching it, you're not just observing. For those 2 hours, you are vicariously, safely living out a trajectory of collapse that your superego would never permit in your actual life.
I get to experience the abyss without falling in.
Precisely. Or think about listening to incredibly intense music about grief or rage. The kind of raw emotion society tells you to manage or get over quickly. You know, like Adele, maybe? Or something much angrier.
Whatever resonates. By immersing yourself in it, you're giving a voice, a temporary expression, to those parts of yourself that are usually gagged and silenced by the superego and the demands of polite society.
It speaks the unconscious's language. Symbols, big emotions.
Excess, rupture, the forbidden, exactly. Art provides this immediate low-stakes way for what Freud called the return of the repressed. The buried stuff gets a brief moment in the sun.
You mentioned Greek tragedy before. That feels like a really clear example. Huge crowds watching stories about, well, unspeakable things. Incest, killing your parents, revenge.
Medea killing her children, Oedipus, horrific stuff. And it wasn't just seen as shocking entertainment, it was a civic ritual.
Catharsis.
Catharsis, Aristotle's idea. The purging of pity and fear. The community gathers to confront the absolute worst possibilities, the deepest taboos, the forces that could tear their society apart.
But they do it together in a controlled space.
Communal, ritualized, contained within the play. And the idea was they walked away feeling lighter, purged. Not because they learned a simple moral lesson necessarily, but because the collective horror was acknowledged, experienced vicariously, and contained. The primal, destructive possibilities were given their due, momentarily satisfying the underlying tension.
But does it really purge it? Or does it just acknowledge it, give it a little taste, and then send it back underground? Maybe even more resigned to being hidden? Like, does watching the tragedy make you less likely to act out, or just temporarily less bothered by the impulse?
That is the crucial ambiguity, isn't it? That's the tension we need to keep hold of. For the duration of the experience, the impulse is fulfilled, but only aesthetically.
In a simulation.
Yes. You're allowed to feel the rage, the despair, the forbidden desire completely, as long as it's mediated through paint or sound or narrative. The eye gets kind of satisfaction, potentially mistaking the simulation for the real thing, which might temporarily ease the pressure. Hashtag 1.3 trigger warnings and the impulse.
Okay, let's bring this into today's world. We are swimming in artificial suffering, aren't we? Binge-watching true crime, scrolling through curated trauma on social media, algorithms feeding us exactly the kind of emotional intensity we seem to crave.
It does feel like that, like we're constantly microdosing on simulated chaos, maybe as a kind of psychological vaccine. a way to inoculate ourselves against the real thing.
Or maybe just keeping the beast fed just enough so it doesn't break loose.
That could be part of it, too. And this leads directly to how we now try to manage the risk of these encounters. Think about the whole debate around trigger warnings.
Right. Content warnings before films, books, even articles.
From this psychoanalytic viewpoint, it's fascinating. Because historically, fundamentally, art is supposed to trigger. It's meant to poke the bruise, stir up the sediment, force a confrontation with the buried stuff. That's arguably its core function.
So a trigger warning is like the superego trying to control even the release valve.
Precisely. It's the internal policeman stepping in saying, okay, you can have your little dose of chaos, but let's make sure it's safe, predictable, managed. Let's not have any real disruption here. It's an attempt to sanitize the very space that was meant for the unsanitized.
Making sure even our catharsis is like OSHA compliant.
Something like that. The conscious ego wants safety, predictability. It wants to manage risk. But the unconscious ego, it doesn't care about the warning label. It's been down there starving. It's waiting for the jolt, the resonance, the recognition of its own forbidden nature. The warning just tells the ego to stay vigilant, even during its brief holiday in the unconscious.
And you feel that recognition sometimes, don't you? When a song lyric just hits you right in the gut, and you think, how did they know? It's not always about relating to the artist's specific situation. It feels more primal, like you're recognizing an impulse in yourself that the art has suddenly given voice to.
Yes. The impulse to run away, to break things, to stop being so damn reasonable and accommodating, to burn down the whole tedious performance.
It's the ghost of your own unlived life talking back to you.
Beautifully put. And here's the cruel irony. Often, the more outwardly successful, polite, and well-adjusted someone is meaning, the more effectively repressed they are.
The more they need the dark stuff.
The more violently they might need the art that devastates. Their psyche is starving on the thin diet of polite conversation and functional living. It craves the rich, messy feast of emotional chaos, even if experienced secondhand. The quietest person in the room might be the one with the most intense inner world, desperately seeking an outlet in art that screams. Okay, let's dig into how this internal prison gets built, this process of internalizing authority. We tend to call it growing up or becoming mature.
Yeah, seems like a natural part of development.
But psychologically, it can be seen more starkly. It's often the slow, incremental funeral of your own wildness. Think about it. Every time a child's perfectly natural outburst of anger or desire was met with disapproval, shaming, or punishment.
Good children don't do that. Big boys don't cry.
Exactly. Or later in life, every time you swallowed a legitimate objection in a meeting because it wasn't strategic or team player behavior, every time you nodded politely when you wanted to scream no.
Each one is like another bar on the cage.
Or another shovelful of earth on the buried self. This isn't just about parents, though they are the first architects. The superego gets built by the entire culture.
Schools, media.
Educational systems demanding conformity, social media feeds curating acceptable lives and emotions, workplace culture with its often unwritten rules about deference and acceptable levels of friction, even HR manuals defining what counts as professional conduct.
It's everywhere.
It's the pervasive, often invisible demand. Fit the template, be useful, be productive, be manageable, be quiet about the inconvenient parts.
And we comply because we need to belong, right? We need the job, the friends, the social acceptance. It feels like oxygen.
It does. But the price of that oxygen, from this perspective, is a kind of psychological self-mutilation. We learn to amputate the parts of ourselves that don't fit.
The messy bits, the inconvenient desires, the unproductive feelings like deep sadness or rage, the yearning for something outside the prescribed path.
We cut them off, push them down, and then we learn to call the resulting numbness or emptiness emotional intelligence or maturity or resilience.
While underneath the polished resume, the curated Instagram grid, the calm exterior.
Something is suffocating. The wild self is still down there, buried alive, desperate for expression, for air. We mistake the quiet of suppression for genuine peace.
But it's not peace, it's contained pressure.
It's contained pressure, and the amputated parts don't just disappear, they fester. They leak out sideways as anxiety, as depression, as that feeling of chronic unease or imposter syndrome. The internal landscape becomes a battleground.
Okay, so what are the core energies that this whole system is trying to manage? You mentioned the drives earlier. Freud talked about two fundamental ones, right? Eros and Thanatos.
Eros and Thanatos, the life drive and the death drive. These are the two primal currents running underneath everything, according to this model.
Eros is love, sex, connection.
It's broader than just sex, though that's a key part. Eros is the drive towards connection, merging, building, creating, overflowing. It's the source of passion, creativity, the urge to unite, to build communities, to make something larger than the self. It pushes outwards, seeks synthesis.
Okay. And Thanatos? That sounds ominous. The death drive.
It does sound ominous. It's the counterforce, the pull towards dissolution, towards returning to an inorganic state, towards stillness, towards zero.
So self-destruction, aggression.
It can manifest that way, absolutely. Aggression towards others or turn inwards as self-sabotage, chronic procrastination, that fantasy of just disappearing, wanting to vanish. But it's also related to entropy, the natural tendency towards breakdown and decay. It's the urge to dismantle, to separate, to rest, ultimately.
And civilization, needing order, growth, continuity. It has a problem with both of these in their raw form.
A huge problem. Raw Eros and its demand for boundaryless merging and intensity threaten the stable social structures like marriage, property, predictable lineage.
So we package it.
We sanitize it. It becomes romance mediated by dating apps and economic considerations. It gets channeled into nuclear families, legal contracts, predictable timelines. The wildness is tamed, made safe, predictable, often commercialized.
And Thanatos?
Even more threatening, its destructive potential is obvious, so it gets heavily pathologized or criminalized. Aggression is punished or channeled into acceptable forms like competitive sports or business.
And the inward turning, the self-sabotage, the desire to stop.
We label it depression, burnout, anxiety disorder. We medicalize it, try to treat it with therapy aimed at adjusting the individual back to functionality, or with medication to numb the impulse. We rarely ask what that urge towards dissolution might actually mean, what part of the self or the life situation is genuinely asking to be dismantled.
So the goal is management and redirection, not understanding or integration.
Fundamentally, yes, because the core psychoanalytic principle here is you cannot actually kill a fundamental drive like Eros or Thanatos. They are biological primal energies.
You can only redirect them.
You can only redirect the energy, push it somewhere else. And that redirection has a name. It's called sublimation. This is the great Freudian compromise. It's the process of rerouting the energy from a forbidden or socially unacceptable impulse. The raw scream, the urge to hit, the perverse desire into something that is socially acceptable or even valued.
Okay, give me some examples. How does that work?
Think of someone with intense aggressive or destructive impulses. If they acted them out directly, they'd end up in jail or ostracized. But maybe they sublimate that energy
into becoming a surgeon, cutting things open in a controlled, helpful way.
That's a classic example. Or maybe a demolition expert. Or a butcher. Or even a sculptor, violently reshaping materials. The energy of destruction is still there, but it's channeled into a productive, acceptable outcome.
Okay. What about Eros? How is that sublimated?
Intense, perhaps socially problematic, erotic energy might be sublimated into artistic creation, writing passionate poetry, painting sensual art, composing evocative music. The intensity finds an outlet in symbols and aesthetics rather than direct physical expression that might break rules.
And you mentioned the CEO earlier. The woman channeling rage.
Right, the intense, perhaps justifiable rage at societal constraints or personal frustrations, if expressed directly. It might be labeled hysterical or unprofessional. But if sublimated into ruthless ambition, strategic thinking, cutting through competition in the business world.
And it's praised as drive and leadership.
Precisely. The superego approves because the energy is now serving a productive, socially validated purpose. It generates wealth, status, power within the existing system.
But wait, isn't this good?
Good.
If someone channels destructive energy into creating beautiful art or rage into building a successful company, isn't that adaptation? Isn't that what we want people to do? Why call it rebranding instead of, say, healing or transformation?
Because healing or transformation would imply integrating and accepting the original impulse, understanding its roots, perhaps finding peace with it. Sublimation isn't about peace. It's about rechanneling. It's a strategic maneuver, a mask.
So the energy is still underneath. The rage is still rage.
Yeah. The drive is still the drive. The CEO might be incredibly successful, but deep down, the original engine might still be that unexpressed, perhaps unacknowledged fury. They've found a brilliant, socially rewarded way to discharge the energy, but maybe not to understand or resolve the source. It's survival, often highly effective survival, but it requires maintaining the mask.
And art is a prime location for this.
Art is sublimation's cathedral. It's the place where you can explore the depths of despair, rage, lust, chaos. Provided you do it beautifully, skillfully, within an accepted aesthetic form. You can scream if you sing it in key. You can weep if the camera angle is just right. You can confess your darkest thoughts if the prose is elegant. Hashtag tag 2.4 historical corsets and the loopholes.
This seems to map onto history quite well, like you said, the Victorian era. Extremely repressed society, right? Tight social rules, especially around sexuality and emotion.
A very tight corset, socially and literally.
And what kind of art emerges? Gothic novels obsessed with hidden desires, madness, secrets bursting out, Dracula, Jekyll and Hyde. Intense psychological horror.
Exactly. The official culture demanded restraint and propriety, so the unconscious generated these elaborate, often terrifying fantasies as a release valve. The pre-Raphaelite painters, too, think of their art. Full of longing, barely concealed sensuality, tragic figures, it's drenched in the very things the society tried to suppress.
The tighter the rules, the wilder the dreams.
Or the art that channels those dreams. Look at more extreme examples. Authoritarian regimes that demand absolute conformity. Nazi Germany tried to stamp out degenerate art, jazz, abstract expressionism.
But it thrived underground.
It became a symbol of resistance, of the very life force they were trying to crush. Same in Stalinist Russia. The state demanded heroic socialist realism, art that glorified the regime.
And what bubbled up instead?
Samizdat literature passed hand to hand, full of irony, darkness, philosophical questioning, intense private poetry, jokes that mocked the system. The more the external world demanded obedience, the more the internal world craved complexity, ambiguity, even chaos, and found ways to express it, often through art.
So art isn't just a personal release. It's a societal pressure valve, too.
Absolutely. From the perspective of power, art can be incredibly useful. It provides a contained space for dissent, for exploring forbidden feelings. It allows the steam to escape in a controlled way, potentially preventing the whole machine from exploding.
So it doesn't necessarily challenge the prison?
It might just decorate the cell. It gives the illusion of freedom, the feeling of release, which might actually make the imprisonment more bearable and therefore more stable. Sometimes the regime even allows or tacitly encourages certain forms of rebellious art because it knows it keeps the real rebellion safely confined to the realm of symbols. Which brings us to maybe the most provocative, even cynical part of this whole framework. What if the ultimate aim of civilization wasn't just to repress us, to crush our drives?
What else could it be?
What if the aim was to seduce us, to make us fall in love with our own constraints? To make us prefer the safety of the cage, especially if the cage is beautifully decorated.
So art isn't the crack in the wall. It's part of the wall's design.
What if art, especially the art we consume most readily, isn't the loophole out of the prison, but is actually the mortar holding the bricks together?
Wow. Okay, that turns everything on its head. So that feeling of catharsis, that relief after the sad movie.
Is it genuine release? Or is it just a controlled bleed, as you put it earlier, a way to let off just enough pressure so you can go back to functioning within the system?
You rage along with the protest song for 3 minutes on your commute.
And then you walk into the office, put on the professional mask, and get back to the spreadsheet. The rage was felt, expressed aesthetically, contained within the song, and then dissipated. It didn't necessarily fuel any real-world change in your behavior or situation.
It makes captivity tolerable. It gives you the feeling of having felt something real and deep, which makes the day-to-day compliance easier to swallow.
Precisely. The system allows, even encourages you to feel everything, the deepest grief, the wildest rage, the most forbidden desires, but only within the designated aesthetic zone. The movie theater, the concert hall, your headphones, the pages of the novel.
The aesthetic quarantine.
Exactly. It's quarantined off from real life. You feel the intensity, you get the emotional hit. You might even call it therapeutic. But from the system's perspective, it's just maintenance. It keeps the individual psychic pressure from building to a point where it might actually threaten the structure. It's a distraction, a pressure release valve, ensuring stability.
But surely this is too bleak. Art does inspire people. It reveals injustice, it fuels movements, it can genuinely change how people see the world and act in it. Are you saying that effect is just an illusion or negligible?
The potential for art to ignite real change is absolutely there, no question. But think about the dominant mode of consumption, especially now. Does it typically lead to eruption or to containment? Hashtag tag 3.2, consumption versus eruption.
That leads to that modern critique, right? The idea that the more we engage with art about issues, the less we do about the issues themselves.
There's a real argument there. The more empathy we feel crying over a film depicting poverty or injustice, Does that actually translate into more volunteering, more donations, more political action? Or does it sometimes feel like the emotional expenditure in the cinema substitutes for action in the world?
Like, I felt deeply about this, therefore I've done my part.
Exactly. Or the more you blast angry music about corporate greed or political corruption, does that make you more likely to organize, to protest, to quit the job you hate? Or does it just provide a safe outlet for the anger, leaving you feeling vented but ultimately just as compliant tomorrow morning?
So art lulls us. It gives us the feeling of rebellion, the sensation of depth or moral clarity, without the actual risk or inconvenience of, doing something that might have consequences.
It's the illusion of revolt without the cost. And maybe we consume it unconsciously precisely for that reason. Not to feel more alive, more dangerous, more motivated to change things, but actually to feel less restless, to soothe the discontent just enough.
To take the edge off the existential dread or the political anger.
It can function like emotional junk food. It's hypopalatable, gives you an immediate hit of intense feeling, satisfies a craving, but ultimately leaves you unchanged, maybe even slightly depleted, and doesn't address the underlying nutritional deficit, so to speak. It fills the hole without healing it. We mistake the simulation for the substance. Hashtag tag 3.3, the digestion of the artist.
Okay, if the art itself is part of this containment system, what about the artists? The ones who are genuinely channeling their pain, their neurosis, their critique? How does the system deal with them?
The system is clever. It rarely needs to actively silence the truly disruptive artist anymore. That's messy, creates martyrs. It's much more effective to absorb them.
Absorb how?
It commissions them, celebrates them, often after they're safely dead or neutralized by fame, and then, crucially, it digests their trauma and rebellion, turning it into a commodity.
Like Van Gogh's madness becoming museum blockbusters and merchandise.
Exactly. His tormented life and mental illness are separated from the messy reality and become beautiful, valuable objects and marketable narratives. Or Sylvia Plath. Her raw, suicidal despair becomes required reading in English class.
Studied safely, analyzed, contained within academic discourse, the contagion is neutralized.
Precisely. Frida Kahlo's chronic physical and emotional pain, her turbulent life, her communist politics, they get flattened into an aesthetic, put on tote bags and notebooks. The pain becomes branding.
So the wound gets turned into wallpaper. The system takes the genuine article, the raw expression of suffering or dissent,
and it processes it. Edits it, frames it, prices it, packages it for safe consumption. The audience feels like they're getting something authentic, something raw, but they're actually consuming a managed, mediated, market-friendly version of authenticity.
We aren't really confronting the artist's unconscious, we're consuming its curated representation.
We're allowed to admire the chaos, but only once it's been safely framed and hung on the gallery wall, or put between the covers of a book, or streamed on a platform. We aren't allowed to be chaotic ourselves, but we are encouraged to consume the aestheticized chaos of others. Hashtag 3.4, the final aesthetic trap. And this leads to what might be the most elegant, insidious trap of modern culture. We haven't just learned to live with repression, we've learned to aestheticize it. We've turned our own anxieties, our quiet desperation, our unlived lives into content.
We scroll through feeds that reflect our own malaise back at us, beautifully filtered. We queue up shows about the very traps we feel caught in.
We perform our suffering online, curate our vulnerability, and the superego, that internal policeman, has updated its tactics for the digital age. It's not just be good, be quiet.
Now it's be authentic, but a certain kind of authentic.
Right. Be authentic, but make it relatable and shareable. Be healed and document the journey. Be vulnerable, but make sure it's inspiring. And perhaps most subtly, be productive in your pain. Turn your trauma into a testimony, your breakdown into a brand, your dissent into a think piece.
Monetize your misery, or at least make it socially useful content.
We mistake this performance of self-awareness for actual liberation. We think because we can articulate our neuroses in a therapy session, or recognize our patterns in a character arc, or write a poignant post about our struggles, that we've somehow escaped the repression.
But the underlying structure, the demands of the system, might remain untouched.
Exactly. We think we're screaming, but maybe we're just humming along to the tune the algorithm served us. And if the art we primarily consume is itself sanitized, risk-managed, designed for predictable emotional responses rather than genuine disruption,
then the unconscious is still starving.
The unconscious starves. And a starving unconscious doesn't just go quiet, it implodes. It leads to that deeper soul sickness, that chronic self-sabotage, that feeling of living a life that isn't quite real. The quiet death of the spirit behind a facade of functioning. Hashtag tag 3.5, the demand of real art.
Okay, but I have to push back again here. Surely not all art fits this model. What about the truly radical stuff? The art that doesn't soothe, that doesn't offer easy catharsis, that actively resists being easily digested.
You mean art that violates the aesthetic quarantine?
Yeah. Think of something like Artaud's Theater of Cruelty. His whole aim was to shatter the audience's defenses, to confront them directly with primal forces, not entertain them. Or a filmmaker like Lars von Trier, whose work often seems designed to leave you feeling disturbed, implicated, uncomfortable, not purged.
Or certain kinds of performance art, or music that's deliberately abrasive and challenging.
Right. This kind of art doesn't seem to offer a comforting simulation. It feels like it's trying to wake you up, to force you to sit with the discomfort, with the wound itself. It demands something more than passive consumption.
Absolutely. There is art that actively refuses the role of comforting palliative. It aims to disrupt, to provoke, to bypass the ego's defenses and speak directly to or even wound the viewer. It can illuminate the cage in a much harsher light.
So that kind of art can be a catalyst.
It has a much greater potential to be, yes, because it refuses easy sublimation. It refuses to be mere emotional junk food. It presents the repressed material without the usual aesthetic sugarcoating.
But there's still a but, isn't there?
There's still the but of containment. Even the most radical play ends. You walk out of the confrontational art installation, you turn off the challenging music, you close the disturbing book.
And you return to life.
You return to the world where the superego's rules still largely apply, where the demands of function persist. The radical art might leave a residue, a lingering discomfort, a new awareness. It might plant a seed. But the gravitational pull of the everyday, the pressure to re-engage with the performance of normality is immense.
So even the art that shows you the bars of the cage
Doesn't automatically unlock the door. It can illuminate the cage with blinding clarity. But if that clarity only leads to a feeling of sophisticated despair rather than action, then paradoxically the cage might even feel stronger, reinforced by your very awareness of it. Admiring the map of the prison doesn't get you out. Hashtag outro.
So maybe the way to frame this whole deep dive, for you listening, isn't about deciding if art is good or bad, or whether catharsis is real or fake.
Those feel like the wrong questions now.
They might be. The more unsettling question, the truly challenging one, might be this. What if the most comfortable, most complacent, even the most counter-revolutionary thing you do today is consuming a piece of powerful, tragic art and believing that the intensity of emotion you felt has somehow fundamentally changed you or changed anything about your actual life?
What if feeling deeply about the fictional scream prevents you from uttering your own real one? What if the real rebellion, the truly subversive act against the internalized authority, isn't analyzing the art about the cage, but actually rattling the bars? Not consuming the scream, but letting your own forbidden scream, your own inconvenient truth tear through the silence of your real life, consequences be damned.
What if art isn't the mirror showing us the truth, but the beautiful, captivating veil we cling to? Precisely to avoid seeing the truth of our own containment, our own compromises.
The system, the structure of civilization, relies on you processing your difficult emotions safely, efficiently, and moving on. It counts on you finding release in the simulation. It needs you not to become genuinely disruptive, deeply uncomfortable, or dangerously alive. It prefers you remain aesthetically pleased, or at least aesthetically managed, in your suffering.
So here's the thought to sit with, maybe in the quiet after this conversation ends. When was the last time you actually did something, felt something, said something, pursued something that couldn't be easily explained, justified, or turned into acceptable content?
Something that wasn't productive or strategic, or even healing in a neat, presentable way. Something that was just raw, real, maybe even a mistake. Something that couldn't be easily forgiven or sublimated.
Something that risked disapproval.
If you struggle to answer that, if everything you feel and do fits neatly within the lines of acceptability, productivity, or curated authenticity, then from this perspective, you are perfectly civilized, perfectly contained.
And the invitation isn't necessarily to blow everything up tomorrow.
No, perhaps just to notice the containment, to feel the pressure of the unlived life, to let that discomfort, that terror sit with you, let it become unbearable, until the need to stop merely consuming the art of life and to actually start living it in all its messy, unscripted, dangerous reality becomes undeniable.
The choice then. Remain in the audience, appreciating the performance.
Or step onto the stage and risk becoming the chaos you both fear and perhaps secretly crave.